Deep within the darkest of night, a creature moves swiftly and silently, unseen and unheard. What it hunts will never have a chance to even so much as scream once the creature is upon it. It possesses incredible strength, speed, and agility, but the one thing that makes it so deadly and dangerous is its irresistible craving for blood. That sweet nectar of life sustains its immortality, and the more years it feeds, the stronger and wiser it gets. This creature is known as the vampire. Within the undead genre, the vampire is one of the most popular and well-known creatures. This creature that sucks the blood from the living can be found in the folklore of practically any part of the world. Its absolute genesis is a mystery. One of the oldest accounts of vampirism and the like dates back to Egypt, circa 1550 BC. The Book of the Dead is a collection of papyruses that contain funerary rites and spells to protect a person as they traveled through the underworld. The Papyrus of Hunefer illustrates the judgment of the scribe with the same name by Anubis. His heart is set upon a scale, while on the opposite side sits the feather of truth. If his heart equals the weight of the feather, he will be admitted as true, but if not, him and his heart will be devoured by Ammit. Ammit was a female demon who was part lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile, who were the three largest known man-eating animals known to ancient Egyptians. She was known as the devourer of the dead and the eater of hearts. Back in ancient Assyria and Babylonia, which is now known as Iraq, there existed Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility. One of the most well-known myths among scholars involving her tells of her descent into the underworld after her lover, Tammuz. Upon her arrival, she demands that the gatekeeper open the doors, or she will bring up the dead to eat the living, and the dead will outnumber the living. Additionally, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which consists of 12 ancient clay tablets excavated on a site near Mosul, Iraq, tells of a story of Ishtar turning a man into a wolf. It's quite strange how possible origins for the werewolf, the zombie, and the vampire, the three being very popular creatures featured in fiction today, come from the exact same ancient source. Perhaps it's no wonder why vampires, zombies, and werewolves are constantly associated with each other today. When regarding Vlad III, more famously known as Vlad the Impaler, it is common that he is associated with vampirism. Dr. Raymond McNally mistranslated a poem written by Michael Beheim in his book, In Search of Dracula. Elizabeth Miller, who is strong authority with vampire lore, wrote an article about the matter titled The Question of Immortality, Vampires, Count Dracula, and Vlad the Impaler.
Now, anyone that undertakes to translate a historical document has to be very, very careful, because translation, and it doesn't matter if it's a document about Vlad or a document about anybody, the very process of translation sometimes changes. But in the case of the Beheim poem, a couple of historians translated it with considerable liberties. There's a little section in the Beheim poem that talks about Vlad sitting down at the table to have a meal and washing his hands in the blood of some of the victims that had been impaled. Now that taken like that is like a kind of image of, reminds one of Pontius Pilate, and was probably intended as, well, I'm washing my hands of these people, right? Well, that's reasonable. But this one individual, Raymond McNally, when he translated this passage, he translated as that Vlad took some bread from the table and dipped it into the blood in the bowl, and then slurped down the bread with the blood, technically, this is his words, not mine, making him a vampire. Now that's taken considerable liberties.
Because of McNally's over-exaggeration, many people were misinformed and consider Vlad to be the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and consider him to be an origin of vampirism. According to Miller's article, this is not true. She also notes of how many other sources have further perpetuated this false information, including the 1996 broadcast of Vampires Thirst for the Truth on the Learning Channel, which claims that Stoker discovered a real person connected to vampire legend, Vlad the Impaler. According to Miller, this was not only ironic but also laughable, were it not for how widespread the belief actually is. The same issue is discussed in the book From Demons to Dracula, the creation of the modern vampire myth, written by Matthew Beresford. In modern times, the vampire we see now in many films, television series, and in novels take from the writings of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was published in 1897. He did not base his vampires on any Egyptian or Magian myths, nor Vlad the Impaler himself, but instead spent 7 years studying European folklore. He was highly influenced by Emily Gerard's 1885 essay, Transylvania Superstitions, which spoke very heavily on vampires and werewolves. Stoker's notes also point out how much he became interested in the name Dracula from reading William Wilkinson's book, Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. Anne Rice uses Egyptian origins to further explain where her characters ultimately come from in the Vampire Chronicles, The Queen of the Damned, which in a sense is like a nod to the scholars who believe the origins of vampires to be from ancient Egypt. Regardless, the 1992 film adaptation Bram Stoker's Dracula and Interview with a Vampire from Anne Rice's novel were both very successful. The films, video games, and books are endless. This creature will not be going anywhere anytime soon, but most likely will continue to be the most fascinating monster through centuries to come, much like it already has. The fiction, entertainment, folklore, and ancient myths surrounding the vampire are as equally immortal and aged as the creature itself.